But first off, let's jump in and see how we can create a method which takes no parameters and doesn't return anything anyway. So to define a method which takes no parameters and doesn't return anything, we'll do this underneath the main method. And you'll notice as well, by the way, that in Java, you define methods inside a class. So here you can see this is the main method, and it's kind of inside the class. You can almost think of these curly braces, which define the block of the method, or these curly braces here, which define the block of the class. That is the content of the method or the content of the class. You can almost imagine these as kind of like being circles, as it were. So in which case, you can imagine that this main method circle is kind of, it's kind of inside this app class circle. So methods, because they're indented, are always defined inside classes. Hopefully you can see what I mean there. At the very least, basically because we have this so-called white space here, we've indented the actual method itself, we can see that methods are inside classes. This is where we represent something being inside something else in Java by adding a bit of indentation here. So anyway, methods have to live in classes, and methods can't live in methods or can't live anywhere else. They have to live in classes. And so therefore, because we've already got a method here, we'll just put a bit of extra space here and add an extra method underneath this one, so it's at the same level, indented to the same place, and yet it's still inside this app class. So methods have certain what's known as method signatures, that is the syntax or the format through which you declare the method. And the format is to first of all put the return type of the value you're returning. Now if you're not returning a value, there's a special so-called keyword you can use for this, and this is called void. So if I start the method with void, it means that I'm not returning anything from this method. Returning something means to pass it back to the caller of the method. We'll see this in a second. But anyway, that's the return type. Then we need the actual name of the method, so let's call it greet. And then we put in some parentheses. These are these brackets. Now what goes inside these parentheses are basically any input parameters which this method requires. Now in this case, we're saying we're going to create a method which doesn't take anything, doesn't return anything, so we'll just leave those as is, which means this method doesn't take any input parameters. And then we use these curly braces or squiggly braces, whatever you want to call them, and just hit enter. Maybe give a bit of breathing room here, go back in with a tab key, and now we can write the body of the method. In other words, between these two curly braces, we can actually put the statements we want to be evaluated whenever we call this greet method. So let's just put a print line to the console, and we'll just say hello, for example. Okay, so at this point, this is a perfectly valid method. Doesn't take any inputs because we've got empty parentheses here. Doesn't return any output because we can see it says void here. And so now this is a method waiting to be called. But you'll see as well that currently it's grey. It's in grey here. And if we hover over it for a second, you can see it says method greet is never used. That's because we haven't called it yet.